Time Life Books, Mysteries of the Unknown. Now, aside from the cover, I guess I can't really flip through and show you all the symbols. You're going to have to spend $1 or whatnot at a thrift shop or something yourself. And it's probably the cheapest book of the series if you buy it somewhere else. But the Master Index and Illustrated Symbols. The first and the last, and what that implies, the colors can mean something, obviously, to have some sort of effect. I think of the the Judgment card from the Thoth Tarot, of the change of the guards, but typically the thought is that it's like all the same, right? The next thing in the book is a diagram of like a mandala that's like some scene in the center, and you have something about the planets, and then you have the 12 signs of the zodiac, and you have the astrological houses, and then you have the winds and the angels and the Christian Trinity and stuff like this. So as long as you don't think that, oh, the symbol's it, right, and get all fanatical like that, and just realize what's being said by this stuff, yeah. Good things to have, I guess. Of course, the swastika is a symbol included, and it does make the point that despite what people think about the NSDAP, there isn't really the reference of it being thought of as evil. You find the Jews in the 30s having the same sort of swastika. One of the Jewish organizations in the 30s, I don't remember, one of their signs was like a swastika with like 3 dots, so the ooh sound. Things don't always mean just the apparent thing. Angels and androgyns can be a literal reference, but they both represent a power beyond, linkage, a sharing of sorts. Apples represent eternal life. A hand up, a hand down. We have other symbols like Cupid, the uniting of the male and the female. Very interesting illustration in this book of some ancient entity treated as a fish goddess with the beasts, and her womb is a fish, and the Ankh relates to that. Auras are supernatural energy, right? Well, there's light, heat, moisture, and magnetism that the body puts out. So I wouldn't oversimplify it like that. And let me just say something. This Time Life book series, I encountered it back when it came out, can in a way be said to be an motivation for my channel. I'm going to go into areas in more detail than what some of these encyclopedic series have had, but and certainly maybe there's some areas that are a little bit taboo and a little bit more misunderstood that I might be willing to say stuff about it that some of these wouldn't. Just because I report on something doesn't mean I'm saying, oh, go off and do it. No, I'm not saying that. Certainly, I posted a song that the 13 Days of Christmas were based on that was like, bears represent a power. Bears are a power that is a danger to us, but useful on the other hand. Depends on how it's turned. A lot of symbols are like that. There's a lot of... It's like tarot. Is tarot good or evil? Well, it depends on how it's used. And honestly, if you think you can shuffle a deck of cards or roll some dice or something like that and tell the future or figure out something unseen other than people's reactions that maybe they're hiding, but diluted. These things are tools. Blood represents life force. And bees represent, the soul, represents a collectiveness. Boats are a symbol of passage between levels or stages. Bulls, both male and female, are signs of immortality. Books represent a knowledge, and they represent a preservation as well, too. Bridges represent filling the gap. Now, polytheistic culture bridges the gap between creator and creation to the point where at least somebody or something can rise to the state of godhood. That perhaps beings can become gods or goddesses. Are there something in between that's not quite that kind of sort of a chain of transmission? A chain of transmission of influence is a very powerful thing to use magically, you could say. If you're influencing people and using that influence to draw that connection that traces back to you. I personally don't care about my personality. That's not what I'm doing. That's why I don't appear in a lot of these videos, but cows represent well-being. The caduceus represents, maybe not as the diagram looks, but those, you have intertwining veins and all sorts of stuff and going up and down your body, to make it brief, right? It's more than veins, but it's not like you can draw circles and weave around literally but there's more than the baseline chakra systems, whether you're talking 5 to 9. I don't know any system that uses more than 9 off the top of my head, but that sort of thing. For the base straight line, certainly this Sephiroth, is there 10 or is there 11? And, that's, it doesn't, that sort of thing doesn't matter as much as people think it does. Circles are cycles. All the parts together, for example. Canopies are like, bring a piece of heaven down into your rituals. I know people are going to say maybe, well, what about the Jews and their booth that has to be open to the sun? Well, it's sort of intermediary. It's not just, okay, here's the physical. We're kind of shielding ourselves a bit, so maybe there's a little bit of a mental connection where we can see through to the great beyond. The crane is a symbol of, immortality and long life. I personally think it's very cool how flamingos will turn pink. Oh, what's that chemical? Really good for your health and whatnot that comes in like red and pink fish. Naturally red, not the stuff that's dyed at the store. Kind of try to avoid that if you can. Get other fish. Demons represent choice and ability to change. Perhaps ability to do bidding, just like angels represent that. These words are a lot more ambiguous when we look into English, but that's for other places, right? Drums can represent sacrifice. Dragons, to Christians, can represent the devil. Going back to the aura thing, if you've experienced the auras, Sori gamma pada ni sha shani da pa magariso. Or, I mean, it usually doesn't happen that quick, but think of it, we're standing there, the auras, it sort of is like some sort of rainbow dragon, and that's you, and you're viewing yourself as a rainbow dragon. It's pretty cool. You should try it. Along with drums, other musical instruments, and dance, or other forms of art, as per se art itself, it represents the changing and the molding of the world and of yourself and your state. And I believe in, three types. There are three types of music. One type I try to avoid as much as possible: the entertainment. Now, a lot of this is, intention, but you can. No, I don't like to waste my time with anything. But so the other is the healing, the curative, that sort of thing, and the other is devotional. Now, I do include the voice as part of this, but when you got the devotional, you can use it for the other. I know how to use various religious texts and patterns and stuff thereof to cause feelings, or to be part of techniques to cause feelings that can produce any high that I've heard of. I may have to study the charts to work with it, of the neurological information and that sort of stuff, to work with the particular centers, to work at creating the pressure or the lack of pressure, the right tone of vibration, that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's definitely one of the things. And going back to blood, you can do more than just alter your blood pressure and heart rate with breathing. There are other things you can do too. Doves represent purity and the right-hand path, and snakes represent the left-hand path, and cunning, becoming, because yoga is the connecting, tantra is the identifying. Externally, they pretty much all look the same. In the Bible, there's that passage that kind of says that you can work them together. So this demonization of the snake too, you can kind of drop that even from a Christian standpoint. Eagles are as storms and war. Eggs are creation, the microcosmos. The macrocosmos, if you consider the world, but in most creation myths, you're not just talking about this planet. The elements, you can have multiple things. It's not just earth is the physical and air is the mental and the emotional is water and fire is, the drive, the will that's kind of beyond the other three. You can have other things you can say to that. Perhaps water is the creative element. In Enochian magic, certainly, the governor names start in water and they finish in water. And the eye is of reason or location. The foot is of traces. It is of support, uprightness, and whether the foot placement is weak or strong, it can represent moral, another spiritual, or more spiritual strength, or some other sort of benefit thereof. Lilies are a merging of power. Goats are sort of a, they're a potency and all that. They're of leadership and independence and all that. And some people say the sheep is the right-hand path and the goat is the left-hand path, but that's not really quite the definition of difference between yoga and tantra now, is it? Now, some of the disgusting and dark aspects of what a person might think of a goat, certainly goats are known to eat and damage what they have been directed not to, and make messes in ways that even the sheep won't make. But the reference to the disturbing, if you're talking about the left-hand path, tells you what not to be, right? All these tantric texts that talk about all these horrible things, it's like, well, it's teaching you about repulsion and what are you going to identify with? And perhaps some of these things aren't for most people. So, like putting horror movies and stuff on the TV, it's like, well, yeah, or even in the movie theater that you have to pay for, it's like, well, if something inappropriate was done in the movie theater during this scene, that can make the difference between someone becoming a killer. It really can. And, if you know anything about true crime, that kind of comes down like that. But we move on to a lighter place. Cups are a symbol of, quests, containment, gardens are a symbol of restraint, serenity apart from certain situations. Griffins, like gargoyles, represent a sort of, going between, as a guardian. And sort of like, they're sort of like a Lucifuge, Mephistopheles sort of character, but not a deal to get something, just it has its duty to keep things from happening, which takes it a different place. Heads represent, the placement of the soul. And in some cases, a harvest, as it could be said. Om Namah Shivaya, Shivaya Nam Om. You literally get this sort of feeling where you're focusing on your head sometimes, and like it's drifting off and you're feeling kind of heady. But, when that feeling comes to people who aren't loopy on drugs, it's an awareness. It's not a detached thing, but it sort of is. So all these metaphors about chopping off the head and all that other stuff, it's sort of talking about the experience, and it's a lot of these experiences that these sensual, emotional, psychiatric experiences that can come through ritual and stuff, particularly because of the drug associations that seems to be what people know about. It sounds super scary and dangerous and all that. It's really not. But yeah, you reach this lofty position, and certainly there's piety and other balances that can be worked into piety, mind you, that are usually associated with this sort of thing. Because, I figured out how to get high without drugs, and it's like, not that you're going around bragging about your character or anything like that. I don't recommend that. When your hair is uncut, it represents doing something for the community. Your hand represents affect. Hourglasses are stages. The interaction of different categories. The heart is emotion. It is life. It is focus, attention, consciousness. Heather is thought to be protective of journeys. Along with fennel, it's one of those things that people thought when a Satanist goes to their gatherings that they go on the back of these things. Hexagrams are of union, but also the hexagram, the double circle, which is in the hexagram that we see herein, is a lunar symbol, a negative symbol. By negative, I don't mean evil or harmful or something like that, but reflective and all that sort of stuff. The ibis is cleanliness and wisdom. Incense is a scent. Ivy is survival. Triumph. Fertility. The Janus heads, with their multiple faces, are different points in time. Jade is a symbol of immortality. Also, it refers to the rabbit, the moon. Knights are domination. Jaguars are the forest. Keys open barriers. Keys show that you're ready. Knots are the creating, doing away with, preventing of problems or other sort of things. Lions are supremacy. Lilies are innocence. Labyrinths are birth and death. Also networking. Masks are identity. Myrtle is never gonna give you up, or however that song goes. The moon is seen as feminine. It's seen as occult. It's seen as, occult influences, you could say. Mandrakes are seen as the healing power of Satan. Man or woman or whatever is neither above or below. A mirror is frailty. Navels are links. Mountains are seen as the impact of devils. Well, it also represents plenty of good things, but Numbers represent interpreting existence. Owls symbolize evil magic. Olives symbolize protection. Ovens represent processes. Peaches represent enlightenment. The daimon in Greek is considered to be the separate gender. So you definitely have to deal with your, if you're female, you have to deal with your response to the male, without this non-binary thing, of course. Because honestly, even outside of gender, we're talking binary. But yeah, you have to deal with the daimon, or daimon. in your process of enlightenment. Pelicans and represent sacrifice, and pyramids do to some people. Maybe not the 8-sided, well, I guess 9-sided because it's base, the Great Pyramid, or your typical 5, like people think the Great Pyramid and pyramids must be. There's also like 4-sided pyramids and other sort of variations on that. People, it really kind of connects to the sun rays coming down in particular ways refracted through things. So prisms contain some of that symbolism as well. Like in my biblical cosmology and demonology for the pentagram rite, I've undone this thing. If you point the pentagram this way, it's good, and the other way, it's evil, and basically the pattern of our physical form, the pentagram and the hexagram, connect to that. Pomegranates are dreams. Peacocks are wonder. Sphinxes are willing to pay the price. Now, I'm not literally just copying out all these ones that I'm seeing here, so yeah. I'm interpreting some of them, and I'm giving other information too. I just thought I'd share a selection of these symbols. A quadritica is a 4-parted thing, and this again can be tied to these elemental divisions, which are not just literal elements. Round tables are egalitarian. Rings are of covenants beyond the set terms. Roses are of the various qualities. The sun represents the linear, the cyclical by the moon. The rabbit is a symbol of fertility. Snakes are renewal. Spirals are, they're a eternity symbol, but an eternity that can be directed. Shells are a symbol of connection to the unconscious. Swans are a symbol of connection to the spiritual. Fire nourishes. Skulls and flowers are symbols of impermanence. Scarabs show what the sun has to do, and perhaps our perception of the sun, because the sun's really not rotating around the earth or that sort of thing, or it's not, rolling through our sky, or, a lot of the stuff that maybe ancient people used to believe. Depending on which way the swastika is pointed, and it doesn't matter whether it's 4 arms or not, or how many twists, or, I guess some stuff does, but, swastika's right. It could be 12, it could be 30, 72, 3, whatever. But if the broken arms, you could say, or whatnot, face right, you could say that's yoga, and if it faces left, it's tantra. But they represent movement and many other things. Pretty much entirely good stuff. Oh, I think I already talked about that, didn't I? Swords and sphinxes are both symbols of protection. The sword represents power, and the sphinx represents more of a sort of wisdom. But in tarot cards and stuff like this, the sphinx kind of, gets out his sword, Doesn't he? Sometimes he gets out his sword. Turtles, tortoises, terrapins, that sort of thing represent the primordial. If you got a snake and a turtle together, pretty cool artifact they show in this one. 2 things, and they're sort of positioned. They're not going to really hurt each other. But if they move their position, tigers are a symbol of cruelty. Tarot cards, runes, all that are a mystical way of organizing a view of reality and a response thereof. Unicorns are virgins, something that needs to be protected. Chastity are chaste behavior that a person wants to assume. People used to believe that vultures were, because they didn't, they were pretty secretive about the impregnation process, the virgin birth thing. Vitriol is complete assent. And it's also uniting the inner and the outer. Triads, body, mind, soul, reflect to, if you believe there's a chief god or goddess, then that. They're often represented as trinities in polytheistic cultures. Of course, if you say that there's a godhead, then, that's polytheism in itself. But, the chiefness of it. Vampires are fear the unknown. But the word vampire comes from predator, something that attacks. So, yeah. It's not, the romance of it's kind of weird. But, sexual repression led to a lot of stories and stuff associated with the vampire, rather than the power to operate at best. Wheels or dynamism. Witches are having trouble dealing with the other. And don't pretend that witch is just a term for a non-Christian polytheist. It's not. Those other cultures usually took issue with those making deals with demons too, because that's really what the term witch means. I've done programs on Wicca, haven't I? And I plan to do a lot more. Wine is consciousness, water is source. Whales are gateways, werewolves are change. Yin-yang is compromise. Foxes are thieves. Feathers are law. Mandalas are melding, and there are many other symbols and combinations of symbols that we can